Welcome back. Come on over to the North Stage. It is my absolute pleasure to bring you our very special PM panel. So a round of applause. Here they are.
Thank you. Thank you. So I guess we're going to introduce our panelists. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with all of us. Unfortunately, J-Tails could not be with us, but everybody's just going to say a little bit about themselves. Hi, I'm Junebug. I've been playing Smash for 8 years now. I've been a top player in Project M and Brawl, and I also hosted this panel last year. So maybe it'll keep being a thing. Who knows? But I hope you enjoy this year. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Messi. I'm not a top player. I'm a top talker. I host Salt Mines, and I co-created PMTV and PMU. And to my right is Stefan.
I'm Cephalon. I was a member of the Project M dev team. I play basically all the Smash games. Been playing for over a decade. You may know me for my Roy play.
And I'm Emo Killer. I was a playtester for the PMDT, Mewtwo player in 3.0, and a Meta Knight player in 3.6.
All right, before we get started into this presentation, we're just going to have a quick little disclaimer here. It's going to be an hour long, split into 3 sections, one about design, one about the present scene of PM, and one about the preservation of the scene. And after each section, there's going to be a short Q&A in which our lovely little assistant will be helping us ask questions from the audience. And please do not ask any questions about the disbanding of the PMDT. We have a former member here, and they would not like to answer said questions. And there is a Satoshi clause because Satoshi asked a question about Ganon's down throw last year. He's a Squirtle player. I think that's enough said in terms of that. But before we get into the meat of this, we have a small little gray area here. You get it? It's because it's the legal gray area. So the problem with PM is Super Smash Brothers is the collaborative work of a bunch of companies, not just Nintendo. The companies like the Pokemon Company, Intelligent Systems, they own the rights to all the characters in PM, and so do Sega and Konami. And because of this, they own these intellectual properties, and it's not illegal to play as much as some people would like to make it seem. But distributing, displaying the intellectual properties of other companies without the consent of said companies is somewhat unauthorized, if not illegal. So even if it were not IP infringement, the modding culture is not as accepted in Japan as it is in America. We don't have companies in Japan like Bethesda who really like displaying the craftsmanship of their community. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say about the legality of Project M. So let's get into design. The design of Project M started because of the differences between Melee and Brawl. For those of you who don't know about Melee, we'll cover it a bit. Melee is a very fast-paced fighter because it's somewhat of a fighter in that you have your grabs that beat shield that beats attack, and attacks that beat grabs. But there's a lot of advanced techniques that are added on top of it. The neutral, or the point in Melee where both players have equal footing and are interacting with each other, is very based on movement. It's fast-paced, and the spacing of safe moves on both on shield and on whiff. And the movement in Melee really facilitates the aggressive play. Without the advanced movement options such as Wavedash out of shield, dash dancing, such an advanced play wouldn't really be possible. And we have a cool clip to kind of demonstrate how Melee works. of course, DI. We're all aware of DI and how that changes traditional fighters. But this is from Apex.
そうですね。
はい。さあここから
もうテール出さない。
テールは出さないですね。
Nice dash
安定
dance
的な
there.
コンボを取ろ
Oh,
うとしています
uh-oh, he got grabbed.
上
No.
上
Hey, hey, oh. Yeah, there was next to nothing he could do. He could have smashed DI'd that forward air, the first forward air, a bit better. But notice how much hit stun there was in that combo. There wasn't many ways to get out. And that's sort of what combos are defined by. Hit stun, linking, and stop last. Hit stun, linking into other moves. In contrast, Brawl was kind of changed what Melee presented. Instead of having moves that had a lot of shield stun, so approaches were more viable, shield stun was almost negligible for most moves in that game. So it made approaching very hard. So the top 10 in that game, rather than being very combo-based, fast-paced, they were valued for their defensive options. And instead of having lots of hit stun, you could act out of hit stun very quickly. But the spacing that Melee sort of developed could still be applied to Brawl. It was just in a different way. And there's actually a cool clip from Apex as well of Marth juggling another character. Perfect shield into punish. Reads the landing. Baits the air dodge. Oh, this is great. He did just walk up slowly and down smash. Yes. Oh. So yeah, definitely slower pace neutral, but you can see a lot of the reads and intelligent play that's happening. But because of that, there was a lot of people that didn't enjoy the style of play as much. And that's how we kind of led to the PMDT. And I'll let Cephalon take over from there.
So the overall, to speak on the origins of Project M, PM actually started originally as a coder trying to recreate Falco inside Brawl Engine, Melee Falco that is, complete with all of his shine, jump, cancel, wave, dashing, combos, etc. And eventually spread on just to include the entire game. The faster combos, the faster speed, movement, shield stun on attacks, so pressure is a thing. A little bit less defensive overall, and faster paced with Melee style engine. So the interesting thing about the Project M dev team compared to a lot of other development teams is that we were like what we like to call a duocracy, in that we didn't really have a pipeline per se. We were all, of course, volunteers. We weren't, we never saw any money for our work. So it was all done on our own time. So rather than having people that were like project leads that would okay things and come up with ideas to work on, a lot of it was just if you wanted to do something and no one else had a problem with it or they liked it, you just did it, which definitely had its upsides and its downsides. A lot of the upsides you can see in the art team for the Project M dev team. A lot of the art is just the artist going, hey, this would be really cool. Maybe we should just do it. And everyone else going, yeah, that looks really cool. Okay, we'll put that into the game. Which is why you'll see a lot of skins for Samus and some other characters. Had some downsides as well, unfortunately. A lot of the development process kind of got bogged down a little bit. Everyone knows about the fiasco of 2.5 Sonic and what a menace he was whenever he was released. A big problem because of that. So we had a forum on Smash Mods, where kind of similar to Smash Boards, we would talk about characters. And to give an idea of how many people were trying to discuss Sonic, at that point of release, the thread for Sonic was larger than the next 3 characters' threads combined, which is so many people trying to put their fingers into the pie per se, and all had a different idea of what they wanted to do to fix the character and what his problems were, etc., etc. So it was an interesting design process. Sometimes it really worked. Sometimes it kind of fell on its head a little bit. But to speak on the actual things, the development itself, pre 3.0 was kind of growing pains for the dev team. A lot of it was figuring out stuff in the code, what exactly we wanted characters to do, how to make it balanced, which is why you'll see some things like 2.5 Sonic, other characters, getting a lot of tools removed and added to try and figure out what niche they fall into. And also, of course, getting the clone engine at a reasonable level where we could be confident of putting it onto people's Wiis and it wouldn't just brick the Wii completely and then they'd have to send it into Nintendo and, talk about how they're hacking all their systems. So once we actually got all that stuff together, the idea for 3.0, as far as overall balance and design went, was that the obviously one of the best parts of Melee is the top tier characters, the space animals, Marth, the technical play from Peach. So the idea was to make all characters at that level, right? That sounds pretty great. That's obviously the core of Melee. It's why people enjoyed the game so much. Anyone who actually played 3.02 could tell you that didn't really work out so well. Having that many characters at that power level and trying to make them all work inside all the various matches of the game was a logistical nightmare. Not really something that really worked out very well. You'll see like the power characters like Mewtwo and Pit who could do pretty crazy things, and they're kind of like statistical outliers even in some ways, just because they tried to make characters that are powerful and fun, because that's one of the core aspects of Melee. So moving on forward for 3.5, we actually made a blog post called "Trimming the Fat," where we were talking about removing some of the more polarizing aspects of the game, making it so that tools that were especially powerful, removing some of their bite so they would still be an interesting aspect of the character's tool sets, but just not an entire Swiss Army knife tool that you could just use for whatever and completely overpower your opponent. Let's see. But yeah, so that was the overarching idea moving into like 3.5 and 3.6 is trying to find that middle line. Not necessarily the space animal power level of characters, but try and put them like around Falcon, where they have powerful tools and powerful traits, but some downsides to make up for that, and maybe not like crazy, crazy powerful traits. Which is about where we left off for the gold version.
And we're going to play a clip kind of to just demonstrate what some of those characters look like. Shoutouts to Eli for making this cool combo video. Oh, Melee Falco. Wow. His combos look the same.
Less balls. Less balls.
Oh. Shoutouts to Pig Fresh. So yeah, basically every character became viable at that point. But there are some downsides to kind of designing a Smash game like the PMDT tried to do. There were a bunch of differences from Melee. Ibu, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. All right. So the big thing with Melee is that it was very hard to stay safe on block. You have to really time your aerials correctly and know where your opponent is going to be in order for a move to stay safe and have an aggressive playstyle. But once you create a meta where you include slow characters that are as strong as fast characters, we end up seeing something where frame data looks very different than something in Melee. So for example, characters like DK and Yoshi, in order to have a character that moves slow and an attack has a lot of startup, the move has to hit very hard in order for them to stays safe on block while still being a slow move. But then when you have a melee player play something like PM, and their shield gets touched by one of these slow moves that they know they can punish in melee, it feels like jank because of that. In melee, combos were really discovered. Moves really weren't thought of by Sakurai to say, okay, we're going to have this bread and butter for this character, and that's how they're going to play. But with PM, we had, realistically, a combo tree in our mind while making characters. So for example, something like Snake's C4. We knew that Snake could land a sticky, and then once he gets either like an up throw into an up air or an up tilt, the sticky is going to result in the follow-up that gives the character the kill. Another example would be like Lucas down air into up smash. There's a little bit of counterplay with SDI, but realistically, if a Lucas lands a down air and they're hyper flame, they're going to get the up smash every single time. So, yeah, Melee has this freestyle combo game. PM, it was very possible to learn a bread and butter that would work on a majority of the cast. I think
I think we're good.
But another aspect of PM would be borrowing mechanics from other fighters. So in 3.0, characters like Snake, Game & Watch, and Charizard had invincibility on their up B attack in order to sort of mimic a Dragon Punch Shoryuken from Street Fighter. We wanted to give characters a invincible, high-risk move that they could use to break out of combos. But borrowing these mechanics like a Dragon Punch, or Rob's air dash, or command grabs that led into big combos, they, to a melee player, feel out of place in a game, in a Smash game. I think that's about it.
Yeah. And the risk reward, I hate to kind of meme on this, but the risk reward for having an invincible move that leads into a full combo, or a command grab that leads into a full combo, isn't as high as previous fighting games which use said mechanics. So it's debatable whether those moves have a place in Smash, but we'll talk about that later, whether any move has a place. We'll talk about Nerf buff cycles now. Messi, you kind of followed the Dota scene a bit, didn't you?
I mean, has anyone here ever played like League of Legends or Dota or Counter-Strike or Overwatch now? And these are huge companies, and you can argue that they're four largest games and communities in the game community right now. And you'll see it all the time with games like League of Legends, where they'll change an item for a specific role and it completely ruins the entire game. Or in Overwatch's case, Zenyatta, I believe, in the first month of competitive play, in hundreds and hundreds of games, was picked 0 times and was utterly useless. These are companies and these are games that have millions of dollars of backing and humongous ways to actually test out these changes, where PM really didn't have that. And it made it much more difficult to figure out what character is supposed to get nerfed versus what character is supposed to get buffed. Because usually what you would do is you would have like that advanced version and you'd be very hush-hush. I got like PM 3 point whatever. Come over, play it. We'll see how it is. And it's much harder with a small select group to figure out what might be too much of a buff and too big of a nerf. And a lot of the things that we talked about was how sometimes you buff characters around other characters. So for example, the melee characters were they were emulated to be as close as they could to melee, and everyone else was kind of getting these power spikes, and all of a sudden you realize, well, at what point are they surpassing that? Are they surpassing the melee characters? And another example of like just a bad nerf or buff cycle is kind of like Counter-Strike. In the last 2 weeks, they changed the way every single gun shoots, and you literally change the way the game is played. And sometimes you'll change a character, like you mentioned, the high risk and reward, and you kind of change the way the game is played. That idea of being able to do something that's relevant in Street Fighter, like a wake-up Shoryuken, when you can up B out of a combo, that's not as common in Smash, and it changes the way you kind of look at the game, and it changes the way you have to play it.
Yeah, and the Smash community in general is definitely not as accustomed to dealing with nerfs and buffs. We definitely had a lot of complaining come out when people got their mains nerfed at 3.02 or 3.5. Um, but yeah, nerfs and buffs definitely shift up the meta because they're literally changing the design of a character, and because of that design change, you can have the entire game change. So an example is Marth. Marth in PM used to be very bad because the stages were very big and he couldn't gimp, which is one of his strongest suits in Melee. Come 3.6, where the meta is mostly fast fallers and semi-fast fallers, Marth is suddenly relevant again because he can zero death a lot of the relevant characters. So examples like that change, even a slight character shift across characters can change up the meta. I think that's it for this section, unless some.
I guess one thing is with PM, the development was constantly happening, and we had 20, 30, 40 people that all wanted to get their nerf or buff into the game, which is why we saw very large patch notes with multiple changes for the characters that were all really drastic. Cephalon can talk about Smash 4 nerfs and buffs.
Right, yeah. On the other hand, Smash 4, so PM, the dev team, we would put out lots of changes in one big quick chunk, whereas Smash 4 was, the way that they've done a lot of things have been very incremental. Like the character Mewtwo in Smash 4 was considered to be really, really, really bad whenever he was first released. And then they started just incrementally buffing him just a little bit here and there, and a little bit here and there, and like his dash speed got a little bit faster, and his up smash ended just a little bit quicker, and his forward air hit just a little bit harder. And you look at each of the buff, and you're like, that doesn't really matter. That's not going to do anything. All the problems that the character had are still going to be there. And yet now you see Abadango completely tearing into people, and people are like, oh wow, hold on, this character is actually really good. These very small changes. I don't know if they just unlocked what the character already had, but he does seem like a really, really good character now.
Right. So Smash 4 buffs were sort of based on the devs talking amongst themselves, while PM buffs and nerfs ended up being based on what devs saw in tournament play. So if in a tournament we saw that players were getting a lot of utility out of an invincible up B, or a move that kills that comes out very quickly, or a tilt that covers a lot of space, those moves got drastically changed to be a lot more conditional. So that was another reason that moves just all of a sudden changed drastically from patch to patch.
All right, that is the end of the design section. So right now we'll be taking questions from the crowd.
If you raise your hand, I will bring a mic to you. Just go ahead and stand up and speak loud and clear right on into it.
Hello. With the turbo mode April Fool's Day thing, like that actually came true, would there be a chance if the April Fool's Day for Smash 64 Project M be a thing?
Smash 64 April Fools? Will that ever be real stuff, Mom?
I don't think so, unfortunately. Yeah, that would be different team members that would be working on that, but
Yeah, there were a lot of fun things that dev members did make.
right.
We also saw Ike Climbers.
Right, that's
That
what I was
great.
about to say, is the Ike Climbers, which was actually worked on for an actual code, but was never actually finished. So the Ike Climbers trailer was done by TAS and just imitating Ike Climbers. So there's lots of fun stuff like that the dev team put together.
So you were mentioning like Smash 4 devs did stuff like incrementally and slowly. What was exactly stopping you guys from doing a much like more often updates and like the more drastic changes versus the incremental changes? Like, I know part of it is the number of devs you said all trying to get their buffs in, but like what's all the reasoning behind that?
The reasoning behind massive changes. I guess realistically, people just thought we needed massive changes to balance the game. We didn't. Another benefit would get new players into the game. If someone was playing the same character since 2.5, and we didn't change the character that much, and someone wanted to jump in 3.5, they might feel they were at a disadvantage because the metagame was already so developed and too far ahead. So one benefit of making these drastic changes, revamping characters or introducing new characters, is it made it a lot easier for people to jump into the game saying, nobody knows my character's frame data or options. I can use this to get wins on people that don't know the matchup. So drastic changes allowed the game to feel fresh every year.
Well, my other part of that is, like, as massive changes, like, over long periods of time, as opposed to smaller ones at shorter intervals. Like, why is that? That's my question.
A big reason for that is because we just didn't want to change the game that often.
We also have B versions, like 3.51.
Yeah, we had B versions. A lot of the B versions, though, were more bug fixes than actual gameplay changes. So one of the things that came before Project M was Brawl Plus, and it was a sort of similar idea to Project M in that it was the idea of making Brawl and creating more of a melee-style game, faster paced, etc. And one of the reasons why you don't hear about Brawl Plus is because early in development, they would have these changes, and they would have changes to the game like once a week. And this really, really turned people off from the game because, like, oh, well, I played this game I practiced literally a week ago, and now all of that no longer matters. Why should I bother keeping up with this? So the idea was, for any drastic changes we've had, try to give it like at least 8 months for all the rest of the stuff that we've done to like settle in and simmer and see how that worked before we actually want to change things.
One more?
We should move on.
Okay, we're going to move on, but there'll be 2 more opportunities for questions.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to the present scene of PM. I'm sure a lot of you know how it's doing right now, but this is more for anyone who really wanted to learn about the scene. Right now we have a circuit going on. It's actually very interesting because it's the only Smash circuit going on right now. The Apex circuit was definitely a thing back in the day, but right now Project M is the only game with a circuit, which is pretty cool. It's definitely added a lot of hype to the game. I don't want to toot my own horn, but before the circuit, I was definitely uncontested for a while. And the circuit's definitely showing people that the meta isn't as defined as we would think, and a lot of people are really good at this game. So I'm really liking the fact that it's developing a sort of a lot of local heroes, a lot of stories. Yeah.
I can talk about circuit.
Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah, and one of the things that's important, and it ties into what Emu and Sethlon had brought up about patches and keeping the game fresh. Once the development ceased at 3.6, it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to garner those new players. So over at PMTV, we kind of had a discussion of how do you keep the game in the headlines? How do you make people talk about it? And we kind of threw every resource we had at the wall, and we started the PM circuit. And it is the first installment, so there is going to be a ton of changes as we move forward to Circuit 2. But something that we'd like to do is just try out a bunch of different things. I think the biggest complaints we've had is like a uniform stage list or maybe rankings before the circuit. And that's stuff that we talk about almost every day, and we're probably going to address. Circuit 2 might have one stage list for everything. We may try new things like making sure there's almost like a PMBR and an actual ranking list for these players before the circuit even starts. So it's a clear, more defined thing. And I think something I could say is with the Olympus event coming up, something that we're trying, I'm pretty sure we're confirmed we're going to try it, is the first 16 people in the circuit will be floated. And a lot of people don't like floating seats, but it's the first time ever we have results we can point at and go, this is a circuit event. They perform really well. This is part of their reward for performing so well.
All right.
So in addition to the circuit, we've had a lot of community projects going on. One of the most famous is ResLiv's tier list project. Basically, he took top 50 or 100 players from the individual regions in the world. I think UK and Europe was grouped together, something like that. But the US states were definitely a few representatives from each. And we had a widely different outcome from the years that these projects were taken. So this was last year, and this came out, I believe, a few months ago.
Less than that, about a month ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things you can notice from tier list to tier list is look at the top tier. Look how many characters were considered like this unbelievable character, and it's starting to kind of form into, you start to understand who the really good characters are, and Bowser's still at the bottom there, but other than that, a lot of characters made big moves. One of the characters that moved the most was, what was he bringing up? DK, because of Thunders and Max killed me. DK was one of the characters that moved a ton, and then we were talking about Wolf and how Wolf had no real player playing him and nothing was really going on with him, and then all of a sudden Wolf kind of climbs up the ladder a ton due to some good results from Switch over here on the East Coast.
Could we turn this mic off? Possibly. Oh, okay. In addition to the tier list, we had a bunch of grassroots nationals, and this is an amazing project. I'm not sure how the community wasn't more hyped for this, but the the balcony, which is a TO group in SoCal, they raised $2,000 to fly players out and have a pot bonus for a giant tournament in SoCal. And it was completely grassroots, crowdsourced by the PM community. And it was amazing to see that the community could still do things like that. The community still cares about the game. So that was really exciting. And Big Bell 2 is happening at some point, so that'll be cool. Final Boss, another grassroots national. Yeah. Anybody want to say? Messi.
So some of the metrics that I'd like to share with you guys is that in the past year, and it's pretty much less than that since Paragon happened, and a lot of these streams have moved over to Hitbox. From that time to today, I believe there's 22 channels that between the 22 of them, there has been 950,000 unique visitors to those channels and an accumulation of about 470,000 viewed hours. If you do just majors, the majors alone brought in 250,000 unique views and 200,000 unique views and 250,000 hours, meaning people that watched majors probably sat down for at least an hour and a half and really got into it and really enjoyed what they were watching. And then with their weeklies, they watched it even more. Weeklies on average, I think Nebulous alone brought in about 75,000 hours where people just sat and watched, but the unique visits were about 22,000. So people really, really love their locals. They'll tune into them every single week, and they'll tune into their majors because they want to see their friends, their regions perform well. Kind of blows out what people think, where it's like no one watches it anymore, where you see events like CCC bringing over 2,000 views, Smash and Splash hitting about 3,000 views. Even low tier City 4, with all the issues with the internet, was still hovering over 1,500. And it's stuff that we're going to be improving on because we can work a lot closer with those events in the future and organize them better. Because right now the biggest issue is we have so many events on the same weekend. And you'll see like 4 events on the same weekend and you're splitting and kind of cutting at each other rather than organizing together and saying, can you push your event back a week or we'll push ours back a week, and making sure that everyone can see as much high quality as they can.
Let's move on. So because of the PMCC, just more players playing the game, more people developing their characters, the meta is being very refined. And we're seeing a lot of characters coming out that haven't really been seen in the PM scene prior. One example is Ice Climbers, with fresh kind of popularizing the character, where ice climbers might be pretty good. They kind of have an infinite grab on most of the relevant semi-fast fallers, and or rather a chain grab that leads into their infinite and then spike. Bag season, yes. And in addition to characters like Ices, DK, that can zero death so many characters very, very easily, or not easily, but consistently. Thunders is pretty good. But in addition to characters, being revealed, we have a bunch of unpopular characters that have playstyles that don't really sit well with certain players. Off the top of my head, Game & Watch is probably one of those characters. Snake, definitely one of those characters. There's a few others that don't sit well with people, but yeah. Everybody has their preference there. Bracket matchups. Emu, do you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, so one big thing right now is Melee has gods. There are players in Melee who, at least 2 years ago, did not drop a set ever to a player that was not considered one of these gods. So Leffen broke into that, but there was these players that could handle every matchup. As we've seen with Junebug being the highest rated player on the circuit, and yet still losing to other players, no player in Project M can handle every matchup in the game. And that's not because there's too many matchups. Smash 4 still has more characters than Project M. But we just have to push our metagame farther. And realistically, the top players have to put in the time to learn every matchup.
Yep. Bracket matchups are very important for deciding the results of tournaments, and it's something that people rarely talk about. For example, I know at Supernova, Malachi was seeded 8th, so I had to play him in quarters. Whereas if he had been seeded 7th, I would have not seen him on my side of bracket. And Peach versus Diddy is a notoriously bad matchup for Diddy Kong. So because there are certain polarizing matchups in this game, it's very important to what extent you have a bracket that kind of favors your character. And something that Emu and I have been talking about for a while is the meta is gradually approaching needing multiple characters.
Yes.
Because you cannot have one character that covers every matchup.
Yeah, one of the things is, like, if you notice with Melee now, you'll see that the upper echelon, like those gods you were referencing before, now almost have to have their 2 characters ready, because once you lose the first game, you're forced into a counterpick situation. And something that's really shows itself a lot in PM, at least locally for us, is like when Emo Killer plays Gallo. There's a very interesting Mewtwo. Like, Gallo doesn't want to play the Mewtwo with Mario. He'd rather play with Pit. And you'd rather stick to Meta Knight. And there's like this dance back and forth between these 2 characters. And I think what PM has is PM has these character specialization type of players where if you run into them into a bracket, it's like running into a buzzsaw. You'll have a really hard time. And you need that secondary character that can deal with that matchup a little bit easier. So in a way, that part of the meta is almost accelerated because it took Melee such a long time to get to that point.
All right. So now we'll be taking questions about the present of the PM scene.
I'll start over here.
So I was just curious. If since PM was supposed to be trying to like recreate Melee in a sort of way, and you were bringing characters back like Roy and Mewtwo, how come you never brought back Pichu?
Talked about this yesterday. So that was something that was considered, bringing back Pichu into the game, but ultimately, Pichu is kind of a joke character, honestly, in Melee. While it would be interesting to explore different ways to make him his own unique character that's worthwhile using competitively, we ultimately just, one, couldn't really decide on a direction to take him that would make sense thematically for the character and also make him a competitively viable character. Like, for example, you can make it so he hurts himself, but also does more damage than Pikachu. But he's not the evolved form of Pikachu. Like he's the evolution beforehand. So it'd be really, really weird on that sense for Pichu to be stronger than Pikachu, and also just he's too similar overall. So the work that would be needed to put into him to make him a competitive, viable character was just there wasn't enough interest on the dev team.
So earlier you talked about melee characters, how it was sacrilegious to change them to sort of. So how did you go about developing the lower tier melee characters to make them able to fight higher tier characters? Did you see those sort of combo charts in your head? Like how did characters like Mario, Yoshi, and Roy make their way to PM?
Did you hear?
Yeah. So there wasn't really any like strict way or like a flowchart that we would apply to characters to try and make it so that they're also viable. A lot of what we looked at was just looking at each character's specific strengths and their weaknesses and trying to balance it out so that overall their strengths were better, their weaknesses were lesser. For example, Roy is notorious in melee for having wet noodle for a sword. If you land down tilt forward air on somebody as Roy in melee, your objective afterwards is not to try and combo, but to not get hit back for hitting them. So fixing that obvious problem by just giving him more damage, more hit stun, is the way that you could fix that, specifically in his case. And each character is kind of a character by character basis of what you'd have to do to make them better.
Yeah, and I would think it helps too, having like years and years of melee footage of watching those characters get dumpstered and why they were getting dumpstered. You're like, oh, okay, that could help.
Would you like one more?
Sure.
All right, so for PM now, do you think that there are any characters that are really, really undeveloped? Like with Thunders coming out of, I mean, not out of nowhere, but really showcasing what DK can do. Do you think there are any other characters that could have that right now?
I know I have an answer.
Honestly, I think almost any character that's not being used in tournament in the highest level hasn't been developed. Like, nearly every character is viable in this game.
Pit.
Except Bowser in certain matchups.
I agree. I agree with the screaming person, Pit. Mainly because like people would say like his forward smash is terrible because you can get out of it, and then a player like Gallo just uses it like a jab into another grab, or uses it in a unique way that you don't normally see something used. So Pit is probably my pick along with Vortex's from the crowd, but I agree with Junebug. Almost every single character has not been pushed to that ceiling yet.
All right, my pick for underdeveloped character is Olimar. It's not really well known, but like you can grab the ledge, let go, double jump, air dodge onto the stage, and you will still be invincible. This is something that's in melee. It's a very strong option to get from the ledge onto the stage. I was so excited to find out that Meta Knight has 8 actionable frames after doing a ledge dash. And I thought it was busted. I was so excited. I tell an Olimar player this, and he says, oh yeah, Olimar has 15. He can forward smash, up smash, down smash, grab, all while invincible coming from the ledge onto the stage. So there's not a lot of Olimar players because he is this, I would call it a glass cannon. He can deal a lot of damage, but he's very tiny. It's very tough to get the hit. And once he's off stage, he is dead. So he's certainly a conditional character, someone that you would use only on small stages where your bad recovery is not an issue. But I do think that we will see Olimar on the come up.
Shout out to .com.
Yeah.
That's the only Olimar I know. All right. I think we're done with questions for this section. Now we're going to move on to the future, aka the preservation of Project M. As a community, we can do a lot to kind of make sure the game is seen and, you know, shown to fans that might like it. And one thing we could do is make content like SSBM tutorials, you know, really easily consumable content that kind of shows people how cool the game is. Can show them, hey, are you a wolf main? Or if you are a wolf main, here's how you pillar X character. So that's something that I think would be really important. Side events Side events are super important. Shout out to the Master Gamer Challenge. Kind of fun, ridiculous side events to get people involved in the game. Community crossover also pretty important. It's very all Smash games are similar. You know, they might not be all the same, but there's a lot of crossover. A lot of spacing is the same. A lot of the characters. So I think if more people understand PM, then more people will want to play it. Let's talk about Jank.
I got this one.
Emu knows all about Jank.
Yeah. So essentially, I mentioned it earlier, but we have characters with slow moves that have additional stunts to stay as safe as fast characters like Yoshi and DK. And these other factors, like unconventional movement options. Rob has an air dash, Squirtle has his side B, and Sonic has his side B acting out of up B. There are a lot of movement options that we would never see in a game like Melee, where you are forced to stay grounded, unless you're Jigs, and going in the air puts you at a major disadvantage. We also have unconventional offensive options. Lucario can string together multiple hits on a shield until one of them pokes, and then down B to get away safely if he doesn't think it will. Diddy Kong has Banana and the command grab, but Banana is something that really doesn't work in Melee. It controls a lot of space in a game that you're forced to stay grounded. And then we have Meta Knight, who people call it a teleporting laser knee. Meta Knight's down B can come out as fast as frame 11 and hits a little bit weaker than knee. That you can combo into it and use it, again, very quickly, where you will actually teleport. You are intangible. You can go through things like a fireball, Toon Link bomb, or other attacks. So there are a lot of offensive options in PM that don't exist in Melee. And there's a lot of defensive options. Zelda can set up Din's Fire, again controlling space, and Snake can set up down smash or C4, controlling space in a way that doesn't exist in Melee. So a lot of people would call this jank because characters have options that don't fit with this motif of playing footsies, very quick horizontal movement, being punished for being in the air, when realistically they're just different games.
I actually have a story about Jank that we'll probably get into if we have enough time, but I'm gonna go to the next section for now. So grassroots growth, also very important since it's the major source of growth that we're going to need to do. Local scenes uniting regional scenes. We don't have rankings for our players.
Dashboards.
Well, we have Smashboards rankings, but I've been number 1 for like 3 years, so come on. We need like accurate rankings. Yeah, something similar to Melee It On Me. And that's another community project that I think we'll undertake in the next year. As soon as the circuit is done, I think we'll have enough data. Yeah, local scenes definitely on the decline. Encouraging local scenes and players would definitely help. Shout outs to Jason Waterfalls, a really good TO up in SoCal. He has amateur brackets, he talks to all the newer players. Just does a lot of things to make sure, player retention stays.
Yeah, realistically, there's still a ton of PM tournaments. I'm from New Jersey. There's tournaments in Philadelphia, in Southeast Jersey, in the Shore area. There's tournaments in North Jersey, and there's tournaments in New York City. So it's not a matter of your region not having tournaments to attend to, but we're trying to compete with larger scenes like Melee and Smash 4, who can have multiple weeklies every week and still have 20-plus players attend. With a smaller player group like PM, it's not as lucrative for a TO to host tournaments because you're only going to see 10 to 12, maybe 20 people that are willing to show up every week and not only attend regionals. So having that smaller player base, but a TO still trying to make money by having an event every week, it's they're conflicting. But there are still tournaments.
Yeah, definitely a lot of national tournaments. And some regions have a lot of tournaments. MDVA scene. Yeah, we're here. That's all I'm gonna say. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's. No, the last slide. We're gonna take questions for.
We had the Olympus.
I trust you, Junebug.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah. So
Yeah, look forward
Olympus
to Olympus.
is gonna be a
So,
thing. But
Olympus is going to be a thing in October, the last week of October, and it's probably the most important event that PM has had because we were just discussing grassroots. And believe me when I tell you, there's a very interesting situation that this community is in where we can jump from grassroots to having legitimate sponsors every quarter throwing these big tournaments very quickly. And Olympus is kind of that example where we have a corporate sponsor in Maturino that's going to give us thousands of dollars for pop bonuses, and they're helping us get players to come out, and we're working with a casino and a resort and all this other stuff that we just never really imagined PM would get. And the most important thing is that for you guys to make sure you go and tell your friends, and it will have Melee and it will have Smash 4 because like we spoke about, cross-game promotion is super important, and it is a community, so it's really important for us to make sure that everyone kind of spreads the word about it and make sure that everyone just has a good time because that's what people want to see at the end of the day.
yeah, I'm really excited for that tournament. Any questions about the preservation of the PM scene?
Right in front, I actually am going to ask you to walk to me because I'm going to get feedback if I go too close to that speaker.
Okay.
All right.
Hi, so I came in late, so it's possible you answered this, and I feel bad if you do, if you already did, but I noticed that, speaking of like grassroots and all that, I went to Pound, and when I went to Pound, I really wanted to enter the side tournament, because there's usually side tournaments at these big events, and I looked online and I couldn't really find anything, and then I went to go eat, and I ran into the PM side tournament, and I was like, oh, when was this happening? And they're like, oh, we made a post on Reddit like an hour ago. And then here, for SmashCon, I like noticed one day that I was on Reddit, oh, SmashCon side tournament. I guess what I'm asking is, it seems like side tournaments at big events is a good way to have people play the game, but there's no real way to advertise it, and it's like really, really, really hard to just catch a post on Reddit one day. Are there any plans to make a better way to find side tournaments at major events like this?
I'll talk about this one because since I was kind of responsible or
For tomorrow.
attempting to organize the side event here. SmashCon has been gracious enough to allow us to use their space, but they do not want to be affiliated with running a Project M event. So we're in that weird spot where we want people to know about the game, but we don't want to, make SmashCon get in trouble. So I made a Facebook post, I made a Reddit post, and I encourage people to spread it on social media. Right now, I think that's the best we can do. Maybe in the future we could post to sites like Smashboard. Actually, wait, there was a Smashboards post about the side event. Maybe a post on PM Underground would help. But those are pretty much the main outlets, and we tried to cover most of them: Reddit, Facebook, Smashboards, Twitter. So yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult because it varies so much from event to event. Certain events just have different partners and sponsors, and they're just kind of inclined to listen and make sure they do the right thing, and that's great, and they should do that because the event is the most important thing. And then there's events like Olympus where a lot of it is homegrown, so you don't really have to worry about other people telling you what to do. You just do what's best. So it's difficult because Junebug kind of did the most he could with what the tools he had, but it's also on the community to make sure when they see that post to make sure it gets everywhere. Social media is social, so if if there's more activity there, and I think more people would have known about it sooner. But I agree with you; it's difficult.
Is there another question? Yep. Sorry.
His hand has been up for like 3 years.
I apologize.
It's fine.
All three.
I just feel.
So on the note of like getting the community to popularize events and stuff like Olympus, where you're trying to like actually host like a big regional and stuff, do you see like with the way that things are going? I know that like it's pretty strong with like AZPM and West Coast and like doing decently in like the Northeast of the states. But do you see like in the next couple of years PM getting like back to the point where it was, where you have tournaments like Paragon and MLG Anaheim where top players are picking it up over like Smash 4, or has Smash 4 kind of supplanted it as the secondary Melee game?
I mean, at the end of the day, as like terrible as it sounds, numbers mean everything, and I know that metrics wise, it's important that nearly 1 million people watch stuff this year. So yeah, there's always going to be some type of a market where these big events might feel like it outweighs what they consider a risk or what isn't a risk. So it's very dependent on who talks to who and who can kind of show them that there is a crowd there that wants this to be there, and there is a base that wants to be there. I've spoken to a couple players personally and about Olympus that don't play PM at all. And one of the cool things that they thought was, man, another platform wants to give us attention. That's cool. Smash is cool regardless. I don't care where it's being streamed. So I think that's kind of what the big events worry about, is the streaming situation. And I think it'll be fine. I think in a couple of years we'll have a resurgence, and it'll be kind of like it was 2 or 3 years ago.
It's hard to compete with the growth of Smash 4 and Melee right now. So I think we will have a bigger scene in 2 to 3 years if we keep it up, but I don't know if it will rival Melee and Smash Force.
Yeah. And I guess to speak to the player base, there's a lot, and I mean a lot, of Smash 4 and Melee players that learned PM. Pretty much every Brawl player learned PM in 2.6 and 3.0 days. But all the PM players that stuck around and are going to tournaments, and these tournaments don't overlap with Melee and Smash 4 tournaments, the PM players are getting really good at PM. And all these Brawl players that are now playing Smash 4, and the Melee players that are now focusing on Melee because that's where the numbers and the money is, they're having a really hard time getting back into PM when they know it's not easy money. That PM players have pushed the game, they're learning it, they can combo spacies, and your Melee fundamentals won't carry you. So it's tough for people to enter PM as their secondary game because they don't care about getting better and they're not going to win money. Yeah.
All right, I think we have time for just 2 more questions. Is there anyone that I've also been missing?
I haven't noticed. It's just that guy.
All right, well then I'm going to come to you, and then we'll take one more. But if you guys wouldn't mind maybe being over to the side afterwards, if anyone else has additional questions.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I actually have to go play a Melee pool soon.
So no June bug.
So my question is, as a Smash 4 player, I'm worried about the level of technical skill that you'd need to play PM. Like if I were to try and get into this game, how much time would I have to put into this game in order to do well, at least on a mid-level, if not a top level?
I can talk about it. All right. It definitely depends on your character. You find a character that feels right to you. If you're trying to learn someone like Wolf, Fox, Falco, these fast, technical characters, it's going to be hard. You're going to have to focus on the game. There are slower characters that are a lot more cerebral and read-based that you can pick up instead. Yoshi, even Bowser, Ganon. And as far as learning the game, I understand that if you play Smash 4, you're going to want to spend your weekends playing Smash 4. Project M has a great net play scene. You can go on smashladder.com and play net play with really good players. And if you're playing this read-based character, the online play, it's not going to be a factor. So you can learn the game. It's just a matter of you have to put the time in. Everyone's really good.
Yeah, and I mean, I've run into a ton of really great players, and I've never really had a great player in this community like not explain something if I ask, or at least just sit down and play for a couple hours. And like Emu said, most of the people that are still playing PM are generally really good, so you're going to learn something no matter who you're playing.
Play Ganondorf. It's pretty fun. It's pretty easy.
Last question?
Last question.
The question was play Ganondorf.
So this is about the actual viewing platform.
I
I
can't
don't.
hear you.
Oh, the viewing platform, like how we used to be on Twitch, but now on Hitbox. I don't know if you guys talked about this. I came in a little late again, but this is more about how Hitbox has sponsored us. Like we are, like I'm part of PMTV, and it's really great to have this like dedicated platform that like actually cares about our game. But of course, there's always that looming threat of legal action. Are there any, I don't want to say backup plans, but are there any ideas to how to move forward and like keep not like security of the game?
There's a if you look up the Salt Mines podcast, there's an entire episode where Hawkeye, who's the head of community and my boss over at Hitbox TV, talks about how as long as we don't receive anything, we're never going to force out a community, and we haven't gotten anywhere. No one's been putting pressure on us. No one's complained to us. And to be honest, we've completely loved having Smash there. And I can tell you, Hawkeye has zero experience with the Smash community. Trust me, zero. But he's super dedicated to making the scene grow. And he's in these talks with us with PMTV. He's in the talks with us on how can we build this or do that. And it's really unique because you don't really see that from a lot of people. If it's not something they grew up on or they have an interest in, they don't really care as much. But he's been a good dude, and we've been trying to do everything we can, whether it's going through sponsors that we've never heard of in the Smash community, like Matcherino has been great to us, or just reaching out to some teams that we have connections with and saying, hey, how can we get your player to come and have a good time? We're doing what we can to make sure it keeps growing, and it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon.
Junebug, you probably can talk more. I don't know.
What?
I bet you have stuff to say.
What was the question?
All right. So in the event that this, I'm like actually just taking what Junebug said to me. In the event that something does happen to Hitbox, we still can stream on Twitch under
right.
Brawl.
Right, that. Okay, yeah. So we can still stream on Twitch until your channel gets copyright struck, if it gets copyright struck. Right now, we only have one known case where that's ever happened, and that was at Paragon. So as far as we know, you can stream PM on Twitch. But,
The downside is Project M streamers will never get a sub button.
Yes.
So it is...
You cannot monetize it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is an incentive to stream on Hitbox right now, which is why it's what we're focusing on. But there's nothing stopping us from going back to Twitch other than realistically that, right, you're not going to be able to make Twitch bucks.
Yeah, I mean, a majority of the streams on Hitbox are usually weeklies in these small local scenes, and there was an estimation that if these local scenes just ran ads properly when they had downtime, meaning like 3 minutes of advertisements, they would have probably raised like 15 grand last year for themselves. But no one runs ads in the Smash community, so it was definitely an opportunity for us to make some money for our local scenes and get some setups and do the right thing and get some newer equipment. But that's something I'm just going to be pushing forward with these streams to grow. Like, hey guys, like people are watching. You just have to do the right thing.
All right. I think that's the end of the panel. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you guys so much. Wonderful, wonderful work. So a few of them will be off to your left in a moment if you have follow-up questions. This does conclude